If you've been watching the financial news at all, you've probably heard something to the effect that foreclosures and bankruptcies are on the rise, and this could be the start of another housing crisis. Maybe you're even getting a little uneasy about what's going on with housing, worried about your investment that you're sitting on right now. If that's the case, stick around. You're not going to want to miss this video. This isn't going to crash the market. Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. It is your Central Maine realtor, Nick Isgro with eXp Realty. And today, as I just stated at the beginning, I'm going to go over what's really going on. We're going to dig into the numbers of what's happening with foreclosures and bankruptcies, because a lot of the talking heads on the news, as they always do, are making people nervous about buying and selling, or even about the investment that they've already purchased, that you're sitting there in a home wondering, gee, is my investment about to collapse? I don't really think so, and I'm going to tell you why. Now, before I get into that, I want to welcome you here to the channel. If you've never been here before, we cover all things real estate here in the state of Maine, particularly right here in the Central Maine market. If that's of interest to you or adds value to your process in the buying or selling of homes, or maybe you just like real estate, do me a favor. Go ahead and like this video, hit subscribe, knock that little alarm bell. You'll be notified every time we put out new content. All right, first I want to jump right into foreclosures. This is something we're hearing a lot about, especially when taken in light of potentially being a trigger for another housing crash like we saw in 2008. Of course, I don't actually think that's going to happen. That's why I'm doing this video. Let's talk about those numbers. Let's talk about why it's actually not as bad as people are making out. All right, now, first of all, let's talk about the fact that foreclosures have been at an all-time historic low. Now, part of that, if you recall, back in 2020, 2021, the government put in a forbearance program as well as other programs that were available to essentially stave off the foreclosure process because of COVID. Now we're through that, and of course, if you end a program that is holding off all foreclosure activity, when you pull the program out, you're going to see somewhat of a rise. But when we look at the numbers here, I want to bring up a chart. Check this out. Look here at exactly just how much has changed since that 2008 crash. Look at the difference. You can see we were at a historic low over the last few years during those programs. And yes, foreclosures have been on the rise, but we're nowhere near where we were even pre-pandemic. We are actually lower than pre-pandemic levels when it comes to foreclosures. Now, why is this important? Well, one of the key economic factors that went into that crash of 2008 was millions and millions of foreclosures. Now, those were also based off bad credit. Remember, the banks and the government were working together to essentially push out loans to people who didn't really qualify credit-wise. Since then, banking regulations have come into effect that it means that all of the mortgages that have gone into the system since then have been based off much stricter government standards, much stricter banking standards, and have been generally much better credits. So we don't expect to see that kind of foreclosure activity anytime soon. We're really just seeing a normalization of the market now that a lot of those forbearance programs have ended and we're getting into a generally normal economic cycle. Now, closing out the discussion on foreclosure, very important also to think about the fact that the market has changed tremendously over the last 5 years. If you're in a home right now, you know you have far more home equity likely than you did even 2 or 3 years ago. That increased equity is actually helping a lot of Americans stave off the foreclosure process if they are hitting a rough patch. Now, the other number we're going to look at is bankruptcies. This is another thing that we've seen a lot of headlines on, that bankruptcies are increasing. That's another thing that's going to combine and bring us into another housing crash. Probably not. Actually, if we look at what's going on with bankruptcies, if we look at even what happened during the pandemic, when a lot of small businesses failed, even a lot of small businesses felt that crunch, it did not trigger the kind of increased bankruptcies that we might have expected or that we saw back in 2008. Again, we have a graph for this. Let's bring it up. Somewhat like foreclosures, you can see this. Not only are, yes, bankruptcy numbers up, but they are lower than the pre-pandemic levels, but also we have to look at that 2020, 2021. Those were lower than actually normal activity years like we saw just before the pandemic. Those were actually a more normalized scenario, but the government provided trillions and trillions of dollars in different government programs to help businesses stay afloat, to help people stay afloat. So the bankruptcies actually went down during that time. There was a lot of increased cash flow coming from the government, working to get people through those pandemic years. Now we do see a little bit of a bump. I hate to even say normal activity because it's lower than it was before the pandemic when that actually was normal activity and nowhere near what we saw back in 2008. So that's really it. Quicker video today, but as I'm seeing a lot of headlines, I'm getting a lot of questions from people in my local market. These are questions that a lot of people are asking, and it's critical to understand the data right now. And this is why when you understand the data and we look at what's really going on with foreclosures and bankruptcies, a housing crash is really nowhere in the future as far as we can tell from any external data sets that we're looking at when we're looking at these numbers. So turn off the news, analyze the numbers. There's a lot of resources out there. If I hear stuff, and by the way, always when you're thinking about comments, if there's something that you want to know, drop a comment below. That's where I can get ideas to make sure that we all are staying afloat, staying abreast of this information, and really understanding the market and not kind of jumping based off what the talking heads on TV are saying. Now, if you are looking for a real estate professional in the central Maine area to help you with your real estate needs right now, all of my contact information is linked in the post below. Please feel free to reach out. Happy to answer your questions. And even if you're not in the central Maine market, I have business partners all over the US and Canada. Would be happy to refer you to somebody who can take good care of you. Of course, as always, I thank each and every one of you for sticking around to the end of this video. And until the next one, I'll see you next time.